Hey, welcome everybody. My name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, how you doing? We lost track of time here. You guys are having so much fun talking. Let's grab some seats. Let's get this meeting started. Quick. We got a couple quick announcements. We have a group here that meets 6 p.m. every Monday night. Does a step talk. We need speakers. If you'd like to pick up a commitment and do a talk on a step, let us know. If you might have some speakers that be interested in that. Every week we do that. We also have a treatment center rehab commitment every Sunday night at 7 p.m. It's been closed for a couple weeks. If you like to go up there, there's no time constraint. You don't have to be sober any length of time. Just willing to come and share your experience with these people because they're very hungry for any kind of recovery or any kind of fellowship, and also connections coming out. I found that they usually connect to people with less time than people with more time. It's hard for them to conceive while they're sitting in the treatment center about sobriety or any type of long-term sobriety. So see us after the meeting. It's really easy for that. We have flyers on the back table back there. Please help yourself to them. And if you have any other flyers or any events going on in AA, please bring them if they're paper back there. If not, we have a Conscious Contact Speaker Group Facebook page, which I guess you're all pretty much aware of. That's how you find this meeting, and also all the other events that are going on in the tri-state area. So if you have anything going on, please be mindful, post it there. Anything to do with recovery, because that's what we're all about. This group is about service and carrying the message of hope and recovery to the still sick and suffering. So with that, we got a really good lineup for you tonight. Special speaker coming here from, I believe it's Maryland, right? MD. It looks always, I usually put MD, but everybody thinks it's a doctor, so we got a Maryland speaker. But Teresa's going to come up here and chair this. Let's call Teresa up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa, and I'm an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church right here at 8:30 p.m. Food and fellowship start at 8 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. The purpose of the group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town who would like to introduce themselves with their first name?
I'm also an alcoholic. Dan, addict, alcoholic. Dan, alcoholic.
Welcome, everyone. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? I have one right here at the Conscious Contact Speaker Group on June 25th. We're going to have an all-day workshop and breakfast, lunch, speakers throughout the day, and the topic is going to be alcoholism is a family disease. So looking forward to seeing all of you here. Any other announcements? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations. If you would like a CD of any speaker past or present, see me or any home group member before or after the meeting. They are available free of charge. And Michelle is going to come up and read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Yeah, who is it?
And I've asked Kara to come up and read the 12 steps of recovery.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Kara, and I'm an alcoholic. The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when would injure them or others. Number 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, properly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And number 12, having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. I'd like to ask Teresa to come back up.
Our 7th tradition, a reminder that back in the day, we put $1 in the basket. Today, that same dollar would be worth $7.25. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we're going to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, books, CDs, events, workshops. A reminder that there's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit your movement, especially during the speaker's talk. And tonight, I have the pleasure to introduce a very good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, Amanda P. from the Early Bird Group.
Hey guys, my name is Amanda and I'm an alcoholic. I just want to thank all of you for having me here tonight. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to do this. While I wait for God to kick in here, I'm going to start with something from the doctor's opinion, and then we'll see what happens in this room. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed through have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire abstinence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. I have a sobriety date. It's October 18th, 2015. It is not my first sobriety date. My first meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous was in 2012. It's been a crazy journey. It's been an exciting journey. It's been wild. My life is much different than it used to look like, and y'all will hear about that. And I'm going to do my best to not let any curse words slip out of here and stay on track. So I'll tell you very briefly what it was like for me. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I was definitely qualified for Al-Anon before I was qualified for AA. I didn't know that at the time. I learned that here in these rooms. I don't believe that that's what made me an alcoholic. I believe that I was born this way. I believe that I was maladjusted to life from birth. There's definitely times in my childhood where I felt connected to a higher power. And then I found alcohol, and I was disconnected at a very young age for a really long time, and I caused a lot of harm in the process. More than anything, I lost myself. I lost who I was. I did not have a chance at childhood. I did not know what it meant to be an adult. I did not know what it was to have responsibility. And I'll tell you, the very first time that I used alcohol in the way that I use it, which is to absolutely pass out and go to an oblivion and be in another dimension that is not at all positive for myself or the people around me. I was 17 years old, and I had found out some bad news in my life. I bought 2 bottles of Jim Beam. Actually, somebody else bought them because I was underage. That was not my first drink, but this is the first time I felt the effect that alcohol did to my body and to my mind, to my spirit. I remember drinking that, and the first one, just going down. By the second one, I started to feel this like disconnect, but also this connect to just forgetting everything and not feeling anything. I drank the way that I drank, to just forget everything, to not feel fear, to not feel resentment, to not feel anger. I was an angry child. I was a very scared child. Those are my 2 biggest defects still today. And thank God that I can pray to have those removed on a regular basis so that I can live amongst people in a normal way. They hid that second bottle from me. It was in the next day. I found it in a washer machine, and I just remember being really angry. And from that moment on, that's how I handled all my problems. I'm a problem drinker. And then alcohol became my best friend. It was the solution to my problems. I didn't have a solution in life. There's a lot of other things that I've done in my life to try to create a solution for myself. My mental capacity wasn't always there. And I used to self-harm, and I struggled with a lot of things throughout my life. And today those things aren't so apparent in my life anymore. I guess I drank like any of us drank, really. I was young, and I thought it worked, and I had a lot of fun, so I thought. But I'll tell you, it was all about me. I was always the center of attention, and I really didn't care about anybody that was around me. It allowed me to go into a group of people and be whoever the heck I wanted to be. It allowed me to be confident, which I wasn't. It allowed me to feel happy for moments until it came to a point where it didn't. Between the process of that moment and the time that I came into AA, I had 3 children who I wasn't taking care of. I had my first child at like 20 years old, and I was in an abusive relationship, and that's the way that I grew up, so that life's normal to me. I didn't know that people didn't drink the way that I drank. I didn't know that people lived differently than the way that we lived. I grew up in that environment. A lot of it was taught. I aspired to be just like my dad, and I'll tell you, that's what happened. I became just like my dad. And, I can't declare him having any kind of drinking problem, but should he ever decide, he's watched his daughter go through this movement, and he's watched me grow one day at a time. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but I think I was 27 years old when I came to my first AA meeting. And again, something tragic happened in my life. At this point, I'm controlling it. Got to the point where I couldn't get drunk, so I would dabble with non-conference-approved substances. And that would work for a little while too, but nothing worked the way that booze worked for me. Like, it just didn't. It started with that, and it definitely ended with that for me. And I'm really grateful to be in recovery today. When I came into AA, I came here and I was completely broken. I wanted to commit murder, maybe homicide, all of the above. I wanted to harm people in a way that I had never felt that I wanted to harm anybody except for myself. And that scared the crap out of me. And a few years before that, I was in a relationship, and I went to an AA meeting with that guy, and I was just a supporting partner. Little did I know that I would end up in AA years down the road. I had twins at that time. My son, who was about 9 years old maybe, he was living with his dad. I would tell everybody it's because his dad was controlling and he manipulated my child to go there. The truth of the matter is that mom was always blacked out and mom was not being a mom, and partying came first. And I really did think that I was the life of the party, and that was always my priority. I couldn't keep a job. And I would quit jobs if drinking got in the way with that. I remember on St. Patrick's Day, I was working at a job and the bar opened at 10 a.m. and I decided I needed to be at that bar instead. So I just up and left that job, and later I found myself in a relationship with a guy who owned a bar, which suited me very well. And we're not together today, but we're good go-parents. So I had these twins. I didn't know if I wanted to have them. I can tell you that during my pregnancy, I was always sick. I didn't know why I was always sick because I had no idea that I was an alcoholic, none whatsoever. And I ended up in the hospital all the time, and they would treat me and they would take care of me. And I got through the 9 months of my pregnancy like that. I started at 156 pounds. I delivered at 156 pounds with 2 tiny humans inside of me. 2 weeks after they were born, I felt like that was the longest 9 months of my life. Actually, it was 38 weeks, the longest 38 weeks of my life. And 2 weeks later, right off to the bar I go. And there I went. And the progression just got worse from there. I still thought that I was having a lot of fun. It was also the way that I handled my problems. I did not want these kids. I did not know if I was going to keep these kids. I spent the entire pregnancy trying to figure out what I was going to do with them. And abortion wasn't an option for me. So I thought I'd give them up for adoption. They were 6 weeks old when I decided that I would keep them. And those children saved my life. A lot of what I do today is because they saved my life, and I want to be the mother to them that I am today that I was absolutely incapable of doing. Those kids endured a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of the things that I went through as a child, and thank God that I was able to break the cycle. When I got here to AA, I was in a room with, I think it was all men, and they were all a lot older than me, and I was scared, and I didn't know what I was doing here. And I remember I was looking at my feet, and I remember there being a frog on the walkway. And this guy who everyone thought was insane, but he always say the most profound things, and when he talked, I listened. When I went there, that was my last drink at that time in 2012, and I went home later that night, and how I got there was by getting on my knees, praying to a God that I absolutely did not believe in, saying, I'm absolutely crazy, and if you're not going to kill me or let me die, then do something, because I don't know what's wrong with me. And I found myself in AA. I heard a speaker once say that he was sentenced to AA, and I feel like that's true for me too. I was definitely sentenced to AA. And I didn't always want to stay here in all the years that I've been coming and going out of these rooms. But I always end up here because this is where it started for me. And I owe a lot to that. So I go through the process of, AA and trying to figure out what these steps meant. I was, at any given point in my life, I was atheist, I was agnostic, I was a believer, I was a non-believer, I was all of the things, and I was super confused. The only thing that I really heard is don't drink one day at a time and keep coming back. And I'll tell you, you hear people say it all the time, nobody wanted me to come back. I was the girl at the party that you knew was going to black out, and I was probably going to fight a male because that's just how I was. I thought that I was this big, giant woman that could do anything that she set her mind to, and I like to fight, and that's what I did. I'd been arrested for a few times. I had a DUI, and every time that I was in trouble, I can tell you that my headspace was never in the right space, and then I would drink to oblivion, and then I'd wake up and I'd be like, what is happening in my life? When I came here and I saw you guys, I didn't really believe that people were sober in these rooms. I didn't really believe anything you guys said, but I felt the fellowship when I walked into the rooms. I felt the love when I walked in the rooms. And then little by slowly, I started to feel, and I started to connect, and I started to be like, yeah, I drank like that, or yeah, I felt like that. As a matter of fact, I drank like that because I felt like that. And it made sense, right? And they tell me to get a sponsor, and I would sit in the back of the room, and I'm definitely not getting a sponsor. And if I'm getting a sponsor, it's going to be a male, because I'm not talking to the women. And that's just my story. And, I can tell you it didn't work for me. I can tell you that I would go out for the next 2.5 years. And, I eventually did get a sponsor. And these steps scared me. And I remember meeting this girl who actually just got married today. And I asked her, you know, something about the 4-step. I didn't want to like give that trust over to another woman. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom growing up. She was emotionally unavailable. Today I have a great relationship with my mom. You know, I walk in the rooms after her trying to commit suicide and things like that, and she just wasn't there. My dad raised me, and he stood by my side my whole life, and he taught me the way of life of the streets, which is where he grew up, and he did the best that he could. And I remember saying that to her, and she said something to me like, Amanda, you're going to keep doing this for the rest of your life, and if you're not going to do it, then what results are you going to get? And it wasn't exactly that wording, but it was something along those lines, and I decided I would trust this woman. And so I go through the steps with her, and we go through the process, you know, and my spirit is filled, and I'm excited. I couldn't change my ways, though, right? I couldn't change me thinking that I was a center of attention. I couldn't change the fear that I felt when I would walk into a room surrounded by people. I didn't feel like I fit in, even though you guys spoke my language. I didn't agree with the God on the wall, all of it. Like I just couldn't stay. And so I switched sponsors thinking I needed another experience, because another 4-step, that's a great idea. Let's look at my past again so I can tell you guys why I'm the victim of my life, and why this isn't working for me, and why I'm special, and why I'm the exception to the rule of what's laid out here in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I got another sponsor, and I did okay for a little while, and I started working with other women, and I stopped my feet maybe at like the 8th or 9th step. I did some of them, but not all of them. And something happened during that period with that woman. I acted out in my ways, and I'm going to share this with you because I feel like sometimes we're not real enough and honest enough when we step up here, and there's just some things that, you know, we need to talk more about. And I was real sick, and when I put the booze down, the men were my solution, and that old sponsor, that first sponsor that took me through the steps, I ended up, you know, having a side relationship with her fiance, and I felt so broken inside. I felt absolutely broken inside, and I decided that I didn't want to live like that anymore, and I never wanted to feel that pain, and I didn't want to come here, and I didn't want to bleed on you guys because I was bleeding. And so I got this other sponsor, and I go through the steps, and I ended up losing my custody of my twins at the time, little by slowly, and that was set in motion, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I remember an old timer who watched me grow up in the rooms of AA look at me and tell me, Amanda, if you don't do this work, you're going to relapse. And sure enough, 3 months later, I was out there again, and I was sitting in an AA meeting, and I was uncomfortable, and I just couldn't stand the way that I felt inside. It wasn't even about the things happening inside. It was about the way that I felt inside. I just wanted to die, and I've had so many suicide attempts, and it took a really long time for that feeling to go away from me. And because drinking or not drinking, like that's usually my first thought, and you know, drinking just allows me to just kind of skate through life. And I ended up picking up, and I did that for 6 weeks, and I went through detox centers, and you know, I tried to talk to people, and I was completely honest with my sponsor at the time and the people around me, and they supported me and they loved on me. And I'll tell you, when I work with other people today, I don't care if you drank today, you show up anyway, because that's what they did for me. And had those people not shown up in my life when I drank, I don't know that I'd be here today. And you know, I had this experience during that time, and it was the last time that I was blacked out, and I was in this hotel room because I had decided to give my kids to their dad so that I could commit suicide. I knew that I didn't want to live anymore, and I was in this hotel room blacked out drunk. And I remember this lady, and the only thing, I don't remember what she looks like, but I remember her eyes. And I remember her telling me that it just sounds like you've had a rough life and you're a little bit mixed up. 2 days later, I ended up at my mom's house, and I detoxed, and I had enough experience in Alcoholics Anonymous that I knew that this was the only answer for me. And so I ended up back at an AA meeting in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is where my mom lived at the time. I remember walking into that meeting and thinking that I was holding it all together. It took me about 2 or 3 days to detox while mom took care of me and took care of the twins. They were about 7 years old. And I go to that meeting, and there was an old-timer lady that looks at me, and she says, "You're just coming back, aren't you, sweetheart?" And I was absolutely offended. I looked at her and I was just like, how do you know this? And she was right, you know, and that woman grabbed onto me, and I was homeless at the time because I was evicted. I sold my car to get everything that I needed to execute this suicide plan of mine. And I had nothing, and so I didn't have anywhere to live. I would come back and forth from Massachusetts, and every time that I'd go back up there, that woman would surround me with love. She would have me come over to dinner with her and her husband, and she just held my hand and guided the way. And when I was ready to come back to Delaware, which is originally where I had gotten sober, I ended up meeting a woman who was involved in Young People's of AA. And I had made this decision sometime between Massachusetts to Delaware that this time I'm going to do everything that I hadn't done before. Service to others, the step work, showing up, trying to figure out what this God is that everybody talks about in the room, all of it. And at that time I was so on fire and felt so liberated, just because like I didn't end my life and I still had a chance to be a good mom, which is the only reason that I stayed here at first, because I wanted to be a good mom, no other reason, and because they deserved that. I didn't value myself enough. When I stayed here, I met this woman. We go to this Young People's of AA meeting in New York, and I was maybe like 3 months sober at the time, you know, and I remember thinking to myself, it was actually, I would have had like 3 years at that point. It was right around my sobriety date, and that's all I could think of, right? Like, I'm not good enough. Man, I lost out on that date, and I'll tell you what, like, I don't even really care about a date today. I just recently put all of my coins away in my God box, and they sit there, and I don't count the time anymore. And that's a relief for me too, because AA was my higher power. AA was my God. The coins were my God. You people were my God. Sponsorship was my God. It took a really long time to not be people dependent and people reliant in these rooms, you know, and I thought that I would get it, and I didn't understand why everybody was living so free. But when I went to this meeting, I felt something in there, and I remember there's about 3,000 people, and we were circled up in a circle, and I just felt this electricity in this room that I'd never felt before. And the first time in my life, I was like, I actually belong here, right? Because I was questioning whether or not I was an alcoholic. I would see my family drink, and they, you know, had the house, and they had the cars, and the family, and they were able to keep it together. And yeah, they drank. They were my drinking buddies, probably the same way that I drank. But they could keep it together. The difference between me and them is I could never keep it together, not even from a young age. And after that meeting, I left there, and I was just like, we need this in Delaware. You know, Delaware didn't really have Young People's of AA that follow the traditions and the steps and the way that that organization works. And I decided that I wanted to create that here in Delaware, and so like that's what I did. I would go and I would travel to all of these YPAs, and there were definitely hidden motives why I would go to these other YPAs. It wasn't just because I wanted this fellowship and I wanted to grow. It was a lot of fun, and I didn't have to drink while I did it. I got to drink all the Red Bull and all the Mio that I wanted, and I got to stay up all weekend and have these wild times, and it was just like drinking days. And most of the time I didn't feel the way that I felt. I didn't feel like everything was driven by fear. I didn't feel like, you know, I hated the world. I didn't feel like I was worthless. None of that. And so I did that for a while, and we got this YPA started in Delaware. And, you know, we got people involved. I ended up meeting this couple in Minnesota who just happened to be moving to Delaware, who knew all about how starting a YPA works, and they found me when we went to Minnesota, because you get to stand up and represent your state when you're there. And there was 2 of us. We drove 24 hours on that trip, and you know, when I went out to that trip, I was dating somebody. I was in I was in 2 relationships, not just one. And the guy that I had been with, you know, was living in an Oxford house, sobriety house, and I was too. And he was supposed to come out on this trip, and you know, I would push him away right before this trip, and I didn't know how to let somebody love me because I didn't feel lovable. And that guy ended up overdosing on the way to that conference. And we picked up 2 random strangers from AA on the way, and it was, you know, get in the car and just go the AA way, and it was a lot of fun. And then all of a sudden we get this phone call, and we hear that Reds had passed away, and you know, in that moment, I was like, what do I do? I was probably like 5 or 6 months sober, and I called my sponsor and she didn't answer. And so, I called my other sponsor, which is God, and I dropped down to my knees and I asked for direction. And what I had heard was keep going. If you go home, you're gonna get drunk and you're gonna lose everything you've worked for. And so I kept going, and I allowed 100 to 500, it was like 100 to 300 people to love on me and get me through that weekend, and I came home and I had that funeral, and I had so many breadcrumbs left on the way from my higher power showing me that I was in the right direction, and that was the most painful experience that, I had up to this point. And it was really hard to get through, and I went through a dark depression, and I pulled away from AA eventually, and I stopped doing YPA, and there was a point in my sobriety at that time that I thought that death was an option, and so I went and I sought outside help. I got the help that I needed. I got back on track, made a lot of mistakes on the way, lost my kids. I thought that I would never be able to stay sober if I lost my children. And when I say lost my children, I still have joint custody of my kids, but I lost the time. Up to that point, I was the primary caretaker of them for 7 years, and they were my gods. I lived to serve them at the time and nothing else. And they're the thing that kept me alive for a really long time. And, eventually my emotional sobriety comes up. I don't know, if you drink like me, you put the booze down, and all of a sudden all of that stuff comes back, right? Like, I don't know how to be around people. I don't know how to stand comfortably. I don't know how to talk to you. I sure as heck do not know how to be honest with you. And I need you to think that I am okay. And as long as you think that I am okay, then the world is okay. There was no relying on God at that time. It was simply Alcoholics Anonymous, which was enough for me at that point in my life, until my emotional sobriety came into play. And I will tell you that I have caused more harm sober than I think I did out there. There are so many things that I'm not proud of that I have done here in the AA rooms, like stealing money from the baskets. They gave me a meeting key at 6 months sober, and I would go and I would take that money, and I don't even know if I needed that money. I was broke. I stole money from my recovery house. I would go cash these checks, and I was probably like 18 months sober. Absolutely nuts, with no connection to anything, not even a human being at that point in my life. And fast forward a little bit, I remember seeing this woman that I had seen in 2012, and I had asked her to sponsor me. And at the time, she dressed much like I'm dressed today, right? And I was like, well, I'm not hanging out with that girl. She's too cool for me. And I was really judgmental of her, and I was scared to death of her. And I got to this breaking point in my sobriety. I believe it was 2019. I was about 4 years sober, and I started to have issues with my mental health again, and I ended up committing myself into a mental hospital for 1 week, stone cold sober. And that was an awakening for me. I realized at that point that if I didn't do something, I was either going to drink or probably kill myself, because at that time in my life, like, drinking just wasn't an option. I wanted to get my kids back. There were so many things that I wanted to do. So it just wasn't the solution at the time for me. And so I went and I got help, and I found this woman who's my sponsor today. Our relationship today is much like a friendship. We actually lead each other right back to God, and he's the ultimate sponsor in my life today. And she taught me that. And so we go through the step work again, and I, rigorously honest this time. And it wasn't just about putting the drink down this time. It was about the emotional sobriety for me. And I had to do that. I had to go through the steps for the things in my life that I couldn't let go of. And, and I felt some freedom, and I started to work with other women at that point in my life. I started to wisen up. When I found myself in relationships that I had no business being in, God gave me the power to leave those situations. And I think it was about 2018. I remember, being in this relationship and waking up one day, and I'm like, if I stay in this, I'm going to end up drinking, and this is not the look in my life. And I got up and I packed my stuff, didn't even tell the guy I was leaving, and I just left. It was the first time in sobriety that I ever had my own place. Let me retrack. It's the first time in my life that I ever had my own place. I was able to keep a job at that point in my life. So I was able to save money, and that changed a lot of things for me, and I got everything that I wanted, everything that I needed. Don't give me what I want, because when I get what I want and I get too much of it, the fear of failure and success immediately takes over me, because it took a really long time to let go of that fear and not let it consume every part of my body. And I end up getting in another relationship, and I go backwards and get back into this point of depression again. And it was 2020, and it's funny because a lot of people say that they struggled during COVID, and yes, that is true, but I am a queen isolator. I like being alone. That period for me forced me to get closer to God, right? So during COVID, I end up moving back to the place that I'm living in right now. I've been there for 2 years, the longest I've ever stayed put anywhere. I don't have, for a year and a half, I had my boxes all still packed, and I hadn't unpacked them because that's just how I am, right? It's not even about the drink today. It's about all the craziness in my life and all the things that I do and all the things that I think are a great idea when Amanda's running the show. And I really do like to run the show. I really do. And thank God it's not always like that today. And I'm not perfect at this in any way, but I moved out on my own and got a job, and I buckled down, and I started to get all of the things materialistically, more time with my kids. I started to get really prideful around this point in my life, and and then COVID happens, and I tried the Zoom thing, and I really hated it. I didn't feel like I could connect. It's not the same vibe that you feel in a room of AA, and I struggled. And at that time, I started to play sports in an alcoholic way, just like I drank, and work the same way. And next thing I know, 2 years goes by, and I wake up one day. This was last summer. I wake up one day and I realize that I have no idea what happened during that time, and I'm sober, no idea. And I call it the stress blackout. I have no clue where I was going or what I was doing, and I was definitely just relying on myself. And I ended up getting in enough pain at this point in my life that I had to start seeking, and I started having to practice these steps. I know that I'm powerless over alcohol. I have absolute no power over alcohol. Alcohol takes power over me. I never had to be convinced that my life was unmanageable. I never had anything. This is the first time I've stayed put in a house for 2 years. It's a big deal for me. And but the God thing, when it came to giving my power over to God, I really like acting out in my defects sometimes. At this point in my life, I really liked it. I got what I wanted, and I didn't really care if I hurt you either. And I was in enough pain at that time that I started to have to seek and started to get back to basics. These principles were always in my life, and I tried to follow them to the best of my ability, but there was something lacking. And I would contact my sponsor during these times. I would make crazy decisions. I met a guy, and I'm engaged 3 months later, and 6 days after the engagement is off, and I'm back in a bad way. And I remember just kind of crying out to God, and last summer, and I was like, God, just break me, and somebody had told me to pray that prayer, and I was just so broken at the time, and I knew that my ways weren't working, and that I was not going to be successful in life or my sobriety had I not tried to get back to how it was when I was traveling to all of these AA conferences, and I felt like I was on fire, and the light just started to dim. And when I did that, I'll tell you what, my higher power definitely showed up in my life, and it got really real, and I got to learn a lot about myself through the process. And the twins are now 12 years old, and during this period, their mom wasn't very present, and they just turned 13 in April, and I can tell you that my relationship with my kids today is the type of relationship that I've always wanted my whole entire life, not just with my parents, but with people. It is open, it is honest, we can talk about anything. I have a boy and a girl, and my 13-year-old daughter tests my inner gangster every single day. And, but she has this relationship with me now where she can tell me anything. And she tried vaping in the girls' bathroom not too long ago, and she tells mom about it, and I got to share my experience with her. And through the process of going through the steps, and and I'll tell you a little bit of my experience with the steps, but I've been in these rooms long enough and have hung out with enough people in AA that I know that every experience is different. I know that my experience is not going to be the same as someone else's, and I'm not really here to tell you exactly how to do the steps. What I will tell you is that if you don't have a sponsor and you haven't been through the steps, please do so. There is something that happens in this big book here, and it comes alive, and eventually it makes sense, and it didn't make sense to me for about 5.5 years. I was definitely kept here by you guys. I was definitely kept here by the spiritual experiences that I had in that time. It took a while to kind of go to a different point in my life. When I had realized how people dependent I was, and that I would start to kind of get these thoughts of drinking, and the 10-step promises were very prevalent in my life, right? Like I would think about it, but I would recoil like a hot flame, like the big book says, right? And I would never follow through with it, and I would remember what it was like, and I'd remember everything that I would lose. And, I have choice today. And that's the greatest thing that I've been given here in AA, is that I have choice. I was not given a choice, right? I'm the type of girl that when I drink and I go out, the family's usually looking for me, and I'm blacked out in a tree somewhere, wearing dresses, with everything exposed, not knowing how the heck that I got there. That is how I drink. I'm not proud of that. I used to think it was funny, but I'm not today. So when I had gotten to this point and realized how people reliant I was, I knew that it was just a matter of time, that if I didn't get back to the basics here, get back to what it is that we do here, if I didn't get back to being of service. I was working with one woman at the time, and but not very diligently, and she wasn't staying sober, and I really thought that I got people sober when I came here to AA. Like I would work with a woman, and if she was successful, it was because I made her successful. I'm not God at all, and I'm not in control, and I've been able to kind of let people grow and have their freedom, and let them make their own choices. Because I know when I came in here, if you had told me to stay out of a relationship for a year, I was doing the opposite. I know that if you had told me to get into meetings in 90 days, that I was doing the exact opposite. And that was just when I first got here. I eventually became to a point where I was so broken that I had to follow direction. And in the process, I ended up losing myself here in AA. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I aspired to be. I thought that my success was, running meetings, standing at a podium, having all of the attention on me. I really liked speaking, and everything that came out of my mouth was absolute crap. A lot of it was repeated from things that I heard, and I would walk into a room and I was just like, okay, like I'm really doing something here, and I'm getting all of y'all sober, and the power was all within me. And I was broken to a point where I had to realize that that wasn't true, and I had to go back through this process again. And it's been a year now since that journey, and in that time I remember going to a meeting when I decided that I needed to get out of this funk, and they were talking about the first step. And I had a mentor at the time, and I went outside, and my mentor comes out, and I was like, I just want to know how to live life. I do not want to talk about the first step. I've heard this for 7-9 years of being in AA. I know what the first step is. And he looks at me and he's like, you're exactly right where you're supposed to be. And I'm crying and he's crying, and that person taught me, what it was to be God reliant, one day at a time, coupled with my female sponsor. And between the two of them, I was able to get out of self and have a different experience here in AA that, had I known what happens in these rooms, I would have done this stuff a long time ago. But I had no idea what surrendering to my old self would do. And when I went through that process, I started to make choices that weren't about me getting what I wanted, I started to ask God for direction. I started asking God to mold me into the person that He wanted me to be. I started being honest and vulnerable. There is not anything, and forgive me if I'm not being honest, but I think I'm being honest. I don't think there's anything in my life that I've done that someone doesn't know now, right? I can't be uncomfortable in sobriety for very long. I used to be able to do that for months at a time. I used to be able to come in here and fake it till I make it, and I heard that, and I remember asking somebody, what does fake it till you make it mean? And an old timer in the room says to me, this isn't Hollywood, sweetheart. And I didn't understand what that meant, and today I realized what that meant. And when I hear fake it till you make it today, that just means act as if, right? If I want to not be scared in that moment, then I just act brave. And shortly after, everything follows suit. And it's been a lot about undoing everything that happens in this mind of mine. When I came into AA, I would hear everything that I heard in these rooms. I would take everything that I heard in these rooms and I would hold it up here on a pedestal, and my perfectionism came out, and I really tried to be the perfect AA member. I remember speaking at a meeting not too long ago saying, like, I came in these rooms like if I thought like I was going to be the prom queen of AA, because that's really how important I thought that I was. And my ego was squashed here. Nothing in this world has been able to do that for me. Nothing, people telling me, Amanda, you're not showing up in my life. I didn't have a relationship with my mom for 6 years. I went through the amends process, and I know I'm a little all over the place. I went through the amends process, and I make an amends to my mom, and what she says to me is just love me for who I am, and I know that that's hard to do sometimes. And I made a vow to do that, and I made a vow to show up for my mom, and for a really long time it just wouldn't click. We were both in a lot of pain, and but today, like, if I have an issue going on in my life, like, my mom's the person that I call. And I remember going through the step work this last time and my sponsor telling me, you've already made that amends, Amanda, because I just want to keep coming back and telling you the same thing. Like, I'm sorry that I stole your money, Mom. I'm sorry that, I called you everything under the sun, Mom, when I was drunk. I'm sorry that, I used you to take care of my children, Mom. I'm sorry that I really didn't care how you felt, Mom. I'm sorry that I took away your sleepless nights, right? And all of those things. Like, I just wanted to repeat those things over and over and over again. And my sponsor says to me, Amanda, it's about time that you start making these living amends. And I'm just like, what does that mean, And she had to tell me what that meant, right? Like, she had to tell me how to live out living amends, which meant calling my mom and not expecting her to call me. Telling her that I loved her, even if I didn't necessarily think I felt that way at the time. Showing her forgiveness because I wanted her to show me forgiveness. And when I started to do that, my mom had cancer in 2018, and I showed up there, and I was there for her. And through that period and process, like, my mom and I have grown into mother-daughter relationship, best friends. God bless that woman. She is a saint for everything that she's had to deal with us children, right? Like, me and my brother getting in trouble with the police, and then he was in and out of juvie. I only had to get in trouble once, and the police really scare me. So, when I get arrested, I start crying. So I don't really like being in handcuffs. It's not my look today. And I've been arrested in sobriety too for driving on a suspended license. So it took me a really long time to start living right here in these rooms. And so yeah, my mom and I, we have this beautiful relationship as a result. I went through a period where I didn't want to talk to my dad anymore. And I remember the direction that I was given is just wait on it, Amanda. Just wait. Keep praying for the willingness. Keep praying for the willingness. And, in the past 4 months now, my dad and I, past month here, we've talked once a week, right? I call that man once a week. I told my dad that I hated him during sobriety. I told him I didn't want anything to do with him. I blamed him for me having the problems that I had, right? Like, my dad was my drinking buddy. I remember being in Wildwood and doing a 2-story beer funnel off a hotel, and my dad going, "That's my girl," and cheering me on. So I got a lot of validation from my father, and I blamed him for being that way. I blamed him for, growing up on the streets. I blamed him for doing the things that he did to get by, to provide food on the table for his children. And I just couldn't forgive him, and I did the same thing with my dad. I started praying for forgiveness. When he would text me, I would start to text him back, and now we've gotten to the point where, I think it's like the first time in 3 years my dad sent me a birthday gift, and I cried like a baby. I opened that gift, and I was angry when I got it because there's still a little push there for me. I'm still working on letting all of the walls down, and we're still working on letting all the walls down. And I opened that, and and I'm just crying, and my friend is there with me, and I remember, I don't have the ability to be vulnerable in front of everybody. I tend to be able to be vulnerable in front of people like you guys, right? Because I know that you know what it's like to feel broken. I know that you know what it feels like to feel suicidal. I know what it feels like to not be able to not drink one day at a time and not have that choice. And so I can do that here. And in the process of the people that I've met in the fellowship as a result of doing this work and being of service to other people, I have these beautiful relationships today. And when situations like this happen, the people that are in my life today are people from AA, right? When I go through these things, the people that I talk to are people in AA. And, I started to read another big book, and, I have a fellowship somewhere else too, and they're there for me today. But it just doesn't hit the way that it hits here, right? There's a different language between us, and I really appreciate that. And, I called my dad, and I couldn't even keep it together. I'm just like, "I got your necklace," and I'm wearing it right now. And, he's just laughing at me, and he didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what to say. And I'm just like, "That's all I wanted to say, and I love you." And I called my dad on the way here today, and at some point while I'm going through this process, look, guys, I've made the list, right? Did my 4th and my 5th step, 6 and 7, being willing. I wasn't always willing. I feel like I'm willing today. I feel like I'm entirely willing today to allow God to direct my life. But when I had called my dad, I don't know where I was going with that. So I called my dad on the way here today, and we had a normal conversation, and it occurred to me at some point during this process of going through the steps and the work in AA and starting to build honest, open relationships with other people, that it is not my right to hate my dad and not forgive him for doing the best that he can. And if I can't forgive my dad for doing the best that he can, then why do I expect my children to look at me and love me unconditionally when I can't love my father unconditionally? And that was a big eye-opening experience for me to have. And when I recognized that, I've been able to show up in his life, and I've been able to show up in a lot of people's lives that I couldn't. My twin's father, he was also somebody that I didn't know how to make an amends to or anything like that. And, today we co-parent with each other, and, I'm finally in a position where I can go back to court and get my kids for more time, right? And I can show up for them, and I've honestly had them, I think, every weekend for the past month and a half. So y'all, I'm exhausted, right? I have 2 13-year-old twins that drive me absolutely insane, but I learned so much about myself through them. And the men's process is a beautiful process. And then, when I get to 10, 11, and 12, right? 10 is about how I'm treating you guys. 11 is about me and my relationship with my higher power. What am I doing to make sure that I'm seeking that relationship? And then 12, service to others, right? And that's everybody. Sometimes the only service that I provide during a day is to my co-workers or to my children, right? And that's enough. I have to show up in other people's lives. And I was afraid to live a life when I came into AA. And I didn't know how to live a life outside of here, right? Because I was doing everything absolutely wrong for me, right? I get to decide what I want my life to look like. And, and when I kept doing that over and over again, I realized that I had to live a life outside these rooms. Like, I can come in here and tell you guys how I went through the step work and, how I made amends and how I did a fourth and a fifth step and, how I came to believe and all that stuff and how I realized I'm powerless. But if I'm not living it out there and there's not people seeing me live it out there, then why the heck would anybody believe anything that I say? How could I even qualify myself to stand up here if I'm not actually living out there? And, in the past year of my life has been absolutely amazing. Living through this process and working with the people around me and working with my higher power and watching everybody grow around me and all of these relationships. It's all I ever wanted, right? I hear in these rooms a life beyond my wildest dreams. I thought that meant I was going to be rich. I thought it meant I was never going to struggle. I thought it meant that I was never going to feel any bad emotion in my life. All of those times when I have challenging and trying times bring me closer to God. All of those times when I feel like I'm without bring me closer to God. And as a result of being closer to God, my heart is so filled, even through the painful moments in my life, that I just don't even know what to do but to love the entire world, right? And that's just how I am. Like, I just want to give it to everybody. I want to bottle it up, and I want you to feel it, and I don't want anybody to miss out on this opportunity because I'm so grateful that I did not miss out on this opportunity. And I heard an old timer say once, and end around here, if I could give you the experience that I have, give you what I have, if I could give it to you, I still wouldn't. And I thought, well, that's kind of selfish. Why do they want to see me suffer? And I realized today that that's the God's honest truth. Had I not gone through the journey that I've gone through since the first day that I walked into an AA meeting in 2012 to this very moment in my life, standing here in front of you guys, if I had not gone through those things, I would absolutely not be the woman that I am today. I am a mother. I'm a child of God. I'm starting a new job, which is my dream job, here next week, and an exciting opportunity where I get to be of service to other communities while teaching people my trade. I am a friend. I am able to be in a relationship where I can be honest and loving and not just take. I am a daughter, and I am all of the things that I ever aspired to be. And I got those things here in Alcoholics Anonymous by getting out of my way, listening to a few people, and then starting to rely on a higher power one day at a time, which just grows every day. And I have no idea where I'll be 5 years from now, but I do know that if I keep doing what I'm doing today, that the opportunities are endless in my life. And for that, I am grateful. And may God keep you guys in the spaces in between. Thank you for letting me share.
Let's thank Amanda one more time. Thank you. Our speakers come here at their own time and expense. It's customary for us to get in line and form a line and thank them formally. It means a lot to them. It's really important that, believe it or not, our scheduled speaker for this weekend had child problems, so they had to reschedule. So I'm like, oh crap, I got to find this speaker. I got 8,900 contacts in my phone. Well, let me start with the A's. I'm like, Amanda. I call the first one, she says, okay. I'm like, yeah, God is great. Anyway, we got a nice way of closing. Help us eat all that food. There's a ton of food back there, hot dogs, pizza, you name it. Let's say a little prayer. If you care to join us, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. What am I forgetting? Take a moment of silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. Amen. Yeah, we got to put these chairs that are in the front only on the rack if you want to give us a hand. Don't forget the meeting after the meeting. Very important.